Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and today I want to start a journey, okay? So I stand up for the things I believe in Dungeons & Dragons. So what are the things that so first of all, I celebrate Dungeons & Dragons in its form at every point in time, right? And then I say, okay, and then the ways that I want to change Dungeons & Dragons, I do it at my table, and then I tell others about it, and I try to win them to my page 4 modification, my fully Gary Gygax embraced page 4 modifications, right? Page 4 of the Dungeon Master Guide says the rules aren't in charge, you're in charge. If you are running Dungeons & Dragons 100% raw, you're not running Dungeons & Dragons. You must change something, okay? The other thing, though, is you cannot change everything. You cannot abandon the PHB. You cannot abandon the DMG. You cannot abandon the Monster Manual. They are the heart, right? And honestly, I think pure Dungeons & Dragons is allowing every single current edition D&D canon hardback. That's the best Dungeons & Dragons you can possibly run, right? But there are changes I want. And so today I want to kind of start the charge, right? I want to begin to carry the banner for complexity-free Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons for the common woman. Dungeons & Dragons for the common woman, okay? There we go. Dungeons & Dragons for the lay woman, right? Oh, by the way, if you're not okay. Do you know what a lay pastor is? It's a pastor who's not a professional. He has a job, right? And then on Sunday he preaches. Dungeons & Dragons for the lay woman, Dungeons & Dragons for the commoner, the common woman, okay? I want complexity pushed out of Dungeons & Dragons. And the reason why is I'm sick. I am sick of being surrounded by geniuses at every single D&D table I'm at, right? Like, I just met this dude, right? He is my new Storm Dungeon Master. He's running this Pokemon D&D. He's way smarter than me, and it's very frustrating. I don't really like it a lot, right? We were discussing Aragon, right? I had this. So I break apart on one of my games, right? And I have this conversation, and the one guy goes, "I'm going to explain to you the timetable of Aragon," and then he's like, "And this part took this long, and this part took this long, and this part," and my the wheels are grinding in my head, and I'm like, I can barely keep up with this. And then the other guy corrects him. He's like, "No, that would have taken 9 months, not 6 months, right?" And I'm like, and the reality is, everywhere I go, there's just geniuses playing Dungeons & Dragons, right? I'm sick of it. Let's get some non-geniuses up in this John, right? I want complexity driven out of Dungeons & Dragons, right? I want commoners to play it, period, right? And I'm standing for it. I'm standing for common woman Dungeons & Dragons. I'm the first person to raise the banner for it, right? And I'm going to give you some evidence for it, and I'm going to give you we need it. We desperately, desperately, desperately need it. All right. So I'm going to point you to the character sheet on comicbook.com. They did a whole bunch of interviews with the Critical Role people. And it was kind of interesting. The Critical Role people are like, we ain't got time for you yokels, right? So what they did was they emailed them back, right? And the guys at charactersheet.com, they literally read the emails that the Critical Role people sent them as though they were interviews, right? And actually, it's good content. I listened to them; they're very good. I really liked them, but it was kind of like, oh man, that's rough. You guys are just doing interviews. Like, these guys aren't even going to give you time, right? But you're still going to do the interview. Hey, whatever you got to do to get it to work, right? I'm glad they did it the way they did it. All right, I don't want to throw shade on them for that, right? Okay, I got other reasons to throw shade on characterbook.com, right? I think they're incredibly biased toward against Dungeons & Dragons. They are very for any they want another tabletop role playing game to win, right? And they pretend like they look like journalists. I don't think they're journalists. I think they're incredibly effective partisans, right? In the virtual war against Dungeons & Dragons. They're outrageously biased against Dungeons & Dragons. It's galling. It's so deep, right? All right. So all this is happening, right? And So characterbook.com talks about Robbie Damon. Has an interview with Robbie Damon. So Robbie Damon is a very famous, very successful voice actor, right? And so the critical role people brought him in because they love having these voice actors in, because they can bring these characters to life, right? And that's one of their secret sauce for making the most powerful Dungeons and Dragons streams that have ever been created, right? Like, Critical Role is unparalleled. Nobody's ever even come close. Dimension 20 is garbage compared to CR, in my opinion, right? Although their streams cross every now and then, okay? But Robbie Damon said something flat out, admitted it right in this interview. He said, Critical Role invited me to multiple one-shots, and I never bothered to learn the rules. Never bothered. It's right in the interview, right? They invited me to multiple one-shots. I played with them again and again and again, and never bothered to learn the rules. Never bothered, right? And that is the expectation, right? The commoners are like, hey, you play Dungeons and Dragons? And we're like, yes. And they're like, I'm going to sit at the table, I'm not going to read a book, and I'm going to tell you, my God, they're going to say, my vampire raider takes his jagged sword and stabs that goblin in the eye, right? And then we say, well, vampire isn't really a Dungeons and Dragons class, and raider is a subclass, it's not a class, and your jagged sword is a serrated sword, so you'll need to pick up the D8 for damage, right? Like, and they're like, shut up, geek. like, and this is the issue, right? Like, people are like, hey, I'm gonna tell you what I'm playing, I'm gonna tell you what I do, and you over there, nerd person, you're gonna convert that and tell me which die to roll and whether I succeeded or I didn't, right? And what we have right now is we have highly pedantic dungeon masters correcting people and saying, did you do the reading? Like some kind of school marm. And then we have players sitting over here going, oh, if you get this subclass, you're going to be able to squeeze out this more jiggity boo. You're going to be able to squeeze out this more jingleberries on your jaharkle. And you're like, what? Like, none of this is helpful, right? And so the reality is, like, the rest of the world is ready for Dungeons and Dragons. They're like, I'm going to tell you what I'm playing, right? And I'm going to tell you what that person does. Why should it be one bit more simple than that, right? Ron Swanson had it right? Like, commerce should be, I have an apple cart, you have $1. I give you the apple, you give me the $1. Transaction done. Period, end of sentence, right? And I'm here for it, right? I'm sick to death of playing Dungeons and Dragons with geniuses all the time, right? Because 8,000 pages of canon have ensured that the only people I'm playing with are highly read, highly intelligent, highly prolific artists, right? That's all that we have, right? We want the common woman. We want, the grizzled woman who has dirt on her boots, drives a Ford F-150, right, and just got off of 8 hours of welding and is ready to cut a goblin's head off with her vampire raider and her serrated sword, right? I'm sick to death of complicated Dungeons & Dragons, which is Dungeons & Dragons, period, right? Dungeons & Dragons is way too outrageously complicated, right? And we get in these situations where we get at the table, we grind everything to a halt for 2, 3, 4 hour combats. No story is being told. It's too slow, it's too complicated, and we need to kill complicated Dungeons & Dragons. We need to kill D&D core and rise and lift up, right? Lift up and hold up and celebrate Dungeons & Dragons simple, right? I'm the first person to raise the banner. I want this. I demand this. Let's get it. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. I'm ready for your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing and have a wonderful millennium.